Awesome. All right. So where we're going to be picking up today is we're diving into chapter 8, page 104, Two Wives. Please don't leave. And to be fair, I make that joke every time we're in this chapter. It's like, oh no, two wives. And I will say I've been around long enough that I think I've heard all the jokes because it'll be like, two wives, I get two. You know, when we don't make that joke, it's two employers. Two employers. I've never heard that joke made then. It's like, yeah, I don't want to hustle and grind. I don't want to do that. So, two wives. And it's actually really imperative that we kind of talk about this chapter. And we're going to talk and dive into sort of the title and who this chapter is really to. So some information. This chapter, I'll just cut through all the misinformation, all the stories. This chapter was written by Bill Wilson. And sometimes people think it was Lois. Sometimes people think it was Anne Smith, or that Bill wanted Anne Smith to write this chapter. And at no point did Bill Wilson have anyone else in mind for writing this chapter than him. And so if you're not a fan of this chapter, you might already be like, and he wrote it? That not cool, buddy. Like, not cool. So if you got those objections, you got those like, oh man, I'm not interested in that. Bear with us. Stick with us. We're going to have a brand new experience. And I really enjoy the chapter Two Wives. And part of why I really enjoy this chapter is because we get to have a new experience with it. If you guys are familiar, I'm sure, with the chapter We Agnostics, right? And how many of us came to that chapter We Agnostics and thought, oh man, what does electricity have to do with my illness? What does that have to do with anything? That chapter sucks. But then when we go through that chapter with somebody who is armed with the facts about ourselves, with somebody who is experienced with that chapter, and we begin to see ourselves in that chapter, man, it becomes our favorite chapter. Now, I'm not promising you that Two Wives will become your favorite chapter. I'll do some magic, but it's not going to be that good. But I do promise that you're going to have a brand new experience with this chapter, especially if you're like, I don't like Two Wives. I don't like this chapter. So first and foremost, how do we reconcile this chapter? This chapter is not really about two wives. And what happens is if I read the title of the chapter, I can get stuck in the title and miss who this chapter is really for and the context therein. So I would encourage you, if you're writing in your book today, feel free to cross out the word wives. And I'm going to give you some alternative things that you can write, or some alternative titles of who this chapter is for. And I'm going to have to say them more than once because I can already tell I'm talking too fast. But the first one is that this chapter is not two wives. This chapter is to those who are as bound to the alcoholic as the alcoholic is bound to alcohol. So I'll just say that again. This is the chapter to those who are as bound to the alcoholic as the alcoholic is bound to alcohol. Now, this is an all-inclusive study. Whatever brings you here, you are more than welcome. But if I say to the addict who's, I'm just using alcohol for this because you're going to be like, girl, stop talking. I'm trying to write. Another way to say this is the untreated Al-Anon, to the untreated Al-Anon. Or another way to say it is to the unhealed codependent. And what we're trying to say is that this is not Bill Wilson telling, hey, you're a woman, let me tell you what to do, because I hear that, and I'm going to tell you where to put that information promptly. That's not what this is about. These are suggestions for the people who are not able to leave the alcoholic, no matter how hard they try. And that then recontextualizes this whole chapter. And it changes the experience that we have with this chapter. And again, if you're wrestling with why did Bill write this chapter? I always like to put Bill, there's a lens that I have with Bill. And me, like as if we're homies. Back in the day, me and Billy Dubs, we were hanging with our 1930s dictionaries. But me and Bill had such a primary purpose. If there was ever a human being that was driven by one thing, it was Bill Wilson. And the one thing that he was driven by was to help alcoholics. And we can't deny that that's not true. And because he was, bless you, I know it's the worst when I do that, but his whole thing was, how can I help alcoholics? And so that's the thrust, is how can I best be helpful? So it says, diving in, it says, with few exceptions, our book thus far has spoken of men. Now, keep in mind, when I talk about the 100 members of Alcoholics Anonymous in those early days, I always go 80, and because it was really closer to 80, and there was at that time one woman, plural, or not even plural, singular, one. So when it says, with few exceptions, our book thus far has spoken of men, that was their experience. And in those early days, they were like, can we help women? They are such a different entity. But here's what it's saying. It says, but what we have said applies quite as much to women. Our activities in behalf of women who drink are on the increase. So it's saying, yeah, hey, guess what? And look at us. We got a lot of people who are not men, who are here and sober. And we can say that our example, our experience is that this works. So our activities in behalf of women who drink are on the increase. There is every evidence that women regain their health as readily as men if they try our suggestions. And that's my experience. When I take the actions as outlined in this book, I get well, despite myself, regardless of what I think, regardless of what I believe. But when I don't, I don't. And that's also been my experience. But it goes on to say, but for every man who drinks, others are involved. And it doesn't have to be man. For every alcoholic who drinks, for every addict who uses, for every gambler who places a compulsive bet, for every food addict that takes a compulsive bite, for every one of those people, there are other human beings who are involved. And it says, the wife who trembles in fear of the next debauch, the mother and father who see their son wasting away. And one of the biggest lies that I ever said when I came to the rooms was that I only hurt myself. You know, get off my back, I'm only hurting me. But there were nights my mom would stay up all night to try to watch me, to keep me from going out and getting loaded. Do you know what I mean? But I only hurt myself. I had people that I am the product of failed, I only had one, which I don't talk about because, I mean, it was a failed intervention. But I had people, and I'll tell you a little about it. I used to play rugby, which, if you don't know anything about rugby, it's known as a drinking sport. And at the end of the rugby season, there's quite commonly a kangaroo court where people are given like tongue-in-cheek awards, and there is literally an award for the biggest drunk. And I didn't win because what I was doing was not funny. It was horrific to a group of rugby players. And then they had an intervention, and I'm like, no, thank you. I'm good. I'm like homeless, living out of a backpack. No, thank you, right? Other people are involved, but I cannot see the effect of my illness. Now, hopefully at this time in the book, as we've gone through the actions of the 12 steps, we're working with others. Hopefully we have a lens on which that our actions affect others. It goes on to say, among us are wives, relatives, and friends whose problem has been solved. And I want to emphasize solved. That is available. It is not just, I'm okay, one day at a time, just for today. I'm not going to drink or use or behave poorly. No, it's solved. It's cured. It's not cured. It is recovered. The answer is there. And it says, as well as some who have not yet found a happy solution. But what is on offer? What it's saying is that for those of us who take this course of action, I can recover. I can experience a place where my problem is solved, where the thought to drink, the thought to relapse is gone. And it says, we want the wives of Alcoholics Anonymous to address the wives of men who drink too much. So it's saying that like, hey, we want to approach those who know what it's like. And it says, what they say will apply to nearly everyone bound by ties of blood or affection to an alcoholic. And that's why I talk about this chapter is to those who are as bound to the alcoholic as the alcoholic is bound to alcohol. You see, as an alcoholic, my desire to quit has absolutely no effect. I will say that is it. I am never going to drink again. And with everything that is in me, I mean it. I want to stay sober. I need to stay sober. I have to stay sober. But it has no effect, no lasting effect. And that is just as true for those who are as bound to the alcoholic or the addict. Is they will say, that is it. I'm setting boundaries. That is it. I'm breaking up with you. I'm done. I'm not going to take your calls anymore. And they either go back or they end up back in the same relationship with a different face. I know nobody here can relate to that. Same relationship, different face. I know. That's why breaking up isn't always the solution, because I'll just find a brand new Mr. Right. And I'm gonna make the joke. Rob's probably sick of this. It was never Mr. Right. It was Mr. Right now. And if I'm quite frank with you, it was more often not Mr. Right out of jail, is who that was. I have class. I do not. All right. So it says, as wives of Alcoholics Anonymous, we would like you to feel that we understand as perhaps few can. We want to analyze the mistakes we have made. We want to leave you with the feeling that no situation is too difficult and no unhappiness too great to be overcome. And that is a sneaky little promise. Welcome. We're at the bottom part of page 104. That idea that there is no unhappiness that is too great and no situation that is too difficult. That's what we're saying. And what it's kind of pointing to is the idea of the gift of identification. That ability to see, man, you've gone through what I've gone through. You've experienced what I've experienced. And you have found a solution. There is tremendous value in that. Because I don't know about you, when I came to the rooms, I was filled with, no, I'm different. No. We're talking about, I got sober in my early 20s. So I am young. I'm not like you old people. And by old people, I mean people that are my age. I apologize profusely for how I was when I was new. But like that sort of, I'm different. I'm young. I'm not, I do this and I'm looking for all the ways that I was different. And you can't tell me nothing. But when you've experienced what I've experienced, and you could say, yeah, I've been there too. It cuts through all my andas. It cuts through all my yeah buts. It cuts through all my delusion and all by my denial, and I can see the truth. And I've always been somebody that's been involved in a variety of types of service within 12-step fellowships. And I've done a lot of, in my time, phone monitoring. And what that looks like is I answer the phones. And actually, I was doing a phone monitoring for a fellowship, and they had an old cell phone, and they would pass around the cell phone. And I was at a coffee shop, and I accidentally dropped the phone in the toilet. It was very stressful. It worked out. Put it in rice. It worked out. I just want you to think about that when we think that like I have to do service perfectly. You know what I mean? I dropped the helpline phone in the toilet. Got it right out. Hadn't used it yet, but anywho. But I would do a lot of phone monitoring. And back in the day, most of the calls were like, hey, where's the meeting? What's the meeting tonight? And then occasionally you would get somebody who was calling for help. But a lot of the calls would be the friends and family members of the person asking, hey, my loved one is an alcoholic, or hey, my loved one is an addict. What can I do? And so I would share my experience. You see, of course, I'm an alcoholic. Of course, I'm an addict. And you better believe it. This girl, she's codependent as heck. And I've had to do some Al-Anon. And my lived experience with having to do some Al-Anon, just like a whole set of 12 steps, rigorous program of action. No big. But I've had to do some Al-Anon. But that idea that when people are calling, and they're not the ones who are actively burning their life to the ground. It was easy for my friends who played rugby to be like, You're smoking crack behind a dumpster, pissing your pants with a guy you just met. I think you have a problem, right? Like that, my level of unmanageability, it was on display. It is, there it is. Like it is obvious that I am ruining my life. But those who are trying to control somebody, those who are trying to save somebody, their life is just in as much turmoil. It's just a more of an internal turmoil. And I shared this a little bit. I was with a real catch. He and I were in a codependent, alcoholic, drug-fueled hostage situation in a dumpster that was on fire, that was careening off a cliff, that I called a loving relationship. I'm sure you guys can't relate to being in one of those, but I was in one of those. And I didn't think I had a problem. I thought I need him to get sober. And if I would obviously stop drinking at him if he would just keep his stuff together. Obviously, I'm fine. And he sort of was dancing around 12 step, and he got a sponsor. Didn't do anything with his sponsor, but he got a sponsor. And then promptly, this will be a surprise to nobody who understands how the illness works, relapsed and went on a bender. And while he's on the bender, I'm like, hey, you guys were supposed to be fixing him. You're not doing a job of that. I was getting tired of fixing him. I was hoping you'd fix him up for me. That's the problem with getting a fixer-upper. Couldn't do the, what is it, with the reno or the property swap or whatever. And I called his sponsor. This is how you know I needed Al-Anon. I call his sponsor. And I'm like, buddy's on a relapse. And to like this day, I remember so clearly what he said. He said, Paige, you're the one that's calling. You're the one that needs help. And that experience to say, man, I've been there. I know what it's like to be torn up about somebody else's illness, to experience that absolute lack of freedom because they're ruining their life. And so when I have done phone monitoring and I get calls from loved ones and family members, I can talk about my experience about like, hey, you might find it helpful to try Al-Anon. And I phrase it through the lens of it can be incredibly isolating. And it might be nice to be around people who are going through what you're going through. Again, that gift of identification, that they're not alone. So no situation is too difficult and no unhappiness too great to be overcome. We don't know this in the context of Two Wives yet. But one of the consistent suggestions that we're going to see in Two Wives is do the steps yourself. Take this course of action yourself. So spoilers, that promise is going to come not by me getting him to do what I think he needs to do, not by, controlling, fixing, managing, changing their alcoholism, not even by leaving. And there are times when we need to leave, but it is by having a spiritual awakening myself. I'm throwing that out there as a spoiler. It's rude of me to do that, but I'm doing that anyways. So now what we're getting into in the next few pages, the bottom of 104, 105, we're going to see it all the way up to the top of 107. They're going to do in several pages what we saw done on page 31. And on page 31, it's the longest sentence in the big book when it talks about here are the methods we have tried. We've tried controlled drinking. We've tried drinking beer only. We've tried switching to natural wines, antioxidants. We've tried taking a trip, not taking a trip. Here is what we've tried. And what we're going to read as we go through page 104, page 105, is we are going to see the methods that we tried in order to control and manage the addict or the alcoholic. Now, you might read some of this stuff and you'd be like, if somebody ever did that to me, they would be out the door so quickly. Wonderful. Wonderful. Tell me more about having self-esteem. That sounds lovely. Love to have some of that. But what that means is that this doesn't apply to me. Just like if I'm reading out of the doctor's opinion and it's like, what do you mean you can't control the amount you drink? I can control it every single time, you weirdo. What do you mean you drink when you don't want to drink? What do you mean you don't just say, I don't want to drink and you stay sober. The people that this book don't apply, like the people that don't have alcoholism, they might be like, whoa, that's really extreme because it doesn't apply to them. So what we're essentially doing is qualifying the Al-Anon. And we're going to see that they are just as hopeless as I am. And if you're like, nope, I'm not, that's great. But it is also, so the one, there's a number of ways in which we can view and have a look at this chapter. The first lens through which we can look at this chapter is, how does this chapter apply to me? Do I know what it's like to be codependent? Do I know what it's like to try to fix, manage, save, control people in my life? Whether they have alcoholism or addiction or some other manifestation, does that apply to me? And if not, great. The other is I can have the lens that this is how my illness affects others, to cut through the delusion. And I think that's part of why we don't tend to like this chapter either. It's like, I don't want to look that I hurt at the fact that I hurt people. That's not fun. But that's the power that my illness has. The tornado that is the cycle of my own alcoholism pulls other people in, and they are just as hopeless to escape as I am. And so that's another lens that we can look at. And so, and then there are more, but for right now, we'll have a look at just those two. So it says, we have traveled a rocky road. There is no mistake about that. And I think it's rude to talk about ice cream so early in the book. I'm like, oh, rocky road. No, I'll focus. Every time my brain's like, oh, ice cream. We have tried. So it's like, yeah, it has been rough for those that love us. That's what it's saying. And again, as my dear friend Terry talks about, this book is a mirror. And I can hold up the mirror to my experiences. Is this my experience? Where it says, we have had long rendezvous. So rendezvous, think like a long romantic evening, except this is not going to be fun or whimsical or romantic at all. These rendezvous. We've had long rendezvous with hurt pride, frustration, self-pity, misunderstanding, and fear. Has that been my experience as it pertains to my loved ones that I wanted to fix, to change, to cure, to save? Have I experienced that? These are not pleasant companions. We have been driven to maudlin sympathy, and that's maudlin means that like self-pitying sympathy, to bitter resentment. And I want to talk about being driven, because a lot of times when we talk about like taking our will back, and in step 3 it talks about selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. If you've ever heard or you ever said, I'm taking my will back, or I take my will back, I've got some news. Now, I'm not going to shame anyone and be like, no, you're not taking your will back. But I will point out, I'm not the one that's driving the bus. I am not the one that is in control of my will. My will is being driven by the various manifestations of self. That is who is driving. Not me, because here's what I think. I think I'm doing a great job with my career and my finances and my romance and this and that. And I'll give you guys my alcoholism, or I'll give you guys my addiction, or I'll give you this little piece, but I'm going to hold on to it. But don't you worry. I know I was an irresponsible driver as it pertained to alcoholism, but I'm going to be a responsible driver as it pertains to self and my life. Here's the thing. I'm not driving the bus. The various manifestations of self are driving the bus. There is a madman at the wheel. 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. In this case, what is driving me is this maudlin sympathy, bitter resentment. Those are the only two destinations, this fork in the road. I'm being driven by frustration, hurt, pride, self-pity, misunderstanding, and fear. That is what's taking me. When I'm off the beam, when I'm in self-will, is that my experience? That I am being driven, not that I am driving. And then I can take the lenses. Is it possible that this is how my loved ones feel in relation to my illness? Is it possible that my loved ones know what it's like to be driven by hurt, pride, frustration, self-pity, misunderstanding, and fear, taken to a place of that like horrific self-pity and that bitter resentment? Do they know what that's like? Is that the power my illness has, that it takes other people there? It says some of us veered from extreme to extreme. Again, if we're veering, we're not safe on the road. Just going to point that out. On this road of life, I'm not driving straight. It's veering from extreme to extreme, ever hoping that one day our loved ones would be themselves once more. That this time will be different. Goes on to say our loyalty and the desire that our husbands hold up their heads and be like other men have begotten all sorts of predicaments. Again, this is a mirror. Hold my experience up to this light. Have I ever done this? And some of us are like, absolutely not. I'm not covering from nobody, but is this my experience? We have been unselfish and self-sacrificing. Is this my experience? We have told innumerable lies to protect our pride and our husband's reputation. Told lie after lie after lie after lie. No, he's just got a stomach flu. He can't come in. No, she's just not feeling well at the moment. Oh no, she's just visiting family out of town. Lie after lie after lie. She's just not hungry. Whatever it is. And it says we have prayed. So it even looks like we've taken some spiritual action on this. We have begged. We have been patient. We have struck out viciously. We have run away. We've been hysterical. We have been terror-stricken. We have sought sympathy. We have had retaliatory love affairs with other men. And some of us would be like, if you put me through any of that, absolutely not. But there are some of us who are like, yeah, I get that. And I couldn't leave. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I tried that. Just as I tried controlling my drinks, just as I tried switching my drinks, just as I tried substituting my substances, just as I tried geographic, I tried all these things to exert some power and control over my illness as it manifested as drugs and alcohol. They're trying to exert power and control over me and my illness, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And it says, our homes have been battlegrounds many an evening. In the morning, we have kissed and made up. Our friends have counseled chucking the men. And that's some good friends. Actually, it's kind of like, if you've ever seen the movie My Name is Bill W., it's a whole different vibe. So My Name is Bill W., it's got James Wood and Gary Sinise. And I watched that movie and I'm like, you can do it, Bill. I believe in you. Make the call. Call Abby Thatcher. Call Dr. Bob. Make the call to get a hold of him. Go help him. You can do it, Bill. And then go watch the Hallmark version, When Love Is Not Enough, the Lois Wilson story by Winona Ryder. I'm like, leave him. You can do better, Lois. Leave the bomb. The friends have counseled checking the men, and we have done so with finality. Done. That's it. I am swearing off. Only to be back in a little while. Hoping, always hoping. It then goes on to say, and I had this loaded up to go, but I don't think I have it right in this moment, so I gotta pull it up. What we're seeing there is we're seeing that they are going through the cycle of alcoholism. And this is a wonderful time to do some review. And we're going to see it's the exact same cycle that I go through as an alcoholic or as an addict. And so here it is. That's way over there, and I should put it there. All right, so this is the cycle of alcoholism. And so what we're seeing is when it says we have when it says our friends have counseled chucking the men and we have done so with finality, that is that firm resolution. I am never going to get back together with the ex. I'm not going to deal with my alcoholic mother. I am done, and I mean it. I mean it. I do not want to do it again. And this is sort of the hallmark of what is wrong with me, is that when I say I don't want to do it again, whatever it is, we're going to see that this is the same cycle of alcoholism. It is the same cycle for the Al-Anon, for the codependent, for those who are as bound to the alcoholic as the alcoholic is bound to alcohol, because it is a cycle. And they say, that is it. I am never going to do it again. And then what happens? Only to be back in a little while. So what kicked in was the obsession of the mind, that they had a thought when they were sober, just like I have a thought when I'm sober that says this time will be different. For me as an alcoholic, for me as an addict, it's this time will be different. I'll just have one drink. I'll just smoke a little bit of crack. It'll be okay. But in this case, it's he went to treatment. This time will be different. I'm going to give him another chance. That's what it looks like. And it is the obsession of the mind that makes this thing hopeless, that takes me back to it again and again and again. It goes on to say, our men have sworn great solemn oaths that they were through drinking forever. That great solemn oath is the never going to drink again. So we are seeing that, and we all know what that's like to say, I'm never going to drink again, or I'm never going to use again, or I'm never going to binge again, or I'm never going to relapse again. And what happens? What happens is a day, a week, a month later, I get a thought. And that thought tells me this time will be different. It tells me nobody will ever know. It tells me he'll be different this time. It tells me we can make it work. And we go through it again and again and again. And you see, what happens is I have that obsession of the mind, and it tells me I can do it, and I believe the lie. And I take that first drink, I take that first drug, or we get back with the ex, and I get that. And why do I do it? Why do I do it? I'm after that sense of ease and comfort. I'm after that relief, that warm glow that I get from the bottle, they're getting from that reconciliation with the alcoholic. I'm after not feeling the way that I'm feeling in my skin. And for me, alcohol works. For me, crack cocaine works. For me, the pills that I was abusing, they worked. It worked. And I would get a sense of ease and comfort. But off I would go. And for me as an addict, it looks like the allergy. I need another, I need another, I need another. And for the codependent, it looks like I'm putting up with things that I said I would never put up with. It looks like that enmeshment. I'm there and I'm off on that spree, and a spree is any length of time that I'm drinking or using. It could be days, weeks, months, years. It could be a single evening. But at some point, that spree comes to an end. And I emerge remorseful, and that emerging remorseful leads me to say, I'm never going to do it again. I'm never going to do it again. But a day, a week, a month later, the obsession of the mind. And you see, what happens is at the root of what's going on is I have a spiritual malady. It is not limited to alcoholics. It's not limited to addicts. Human beings have it. But I treat it with the sense of ease and comfort. I treat it with alcohol. And after a while, my mind gets warped, and it cultivates the obsession of the mind that takes me back again and again to that first drink. Or back again and again, back with the ex, or the ex with a brand new face. And we see it again and again and again. And so at root, what is wrong with me is the spiritual malady, that restless, irritable discontent. And that is what we treat in whatever 12-step fellowship you are a part of. The spiritual malady is treated with the spiritual awakening. That emptiness, that hole in the depth of my soul that nothing can fill, we treat that with the spiritual awakening. And how we access the spiritual awakening, how we get the spiritual awakening, it is the 12 steps. That's what gets us off the cycle. You see, the more that I'm on that cycle, the more that I burn my life to the ground, the worse that spiritual malady gets, and ultimately the louder the obsession of the mind gets. So if you're looking at your life and you're wondering why, it's like I was able to stay sober, maybe, maybe language page. I was able to stay sober for, a year, maybe even longer. Why can't I do that anymore? Then able to stay sober for 9 months, then maybe 6 months, then maybe 30 days. And then there are times where we get to that place where we can't stay sober a week, and it's like, what happened? the more that I go through the cycle, the louder that obsession of the mind gets. And it takes me back again and again and again. And so when it says our men have sworn great solemn oaths that they were through drinking forever, that's swearing off, never again, I will never drink again. And it says we believe them when no one else could or would. Then in a few weeks, days, weeks, or months, a fresh outburst. What we're seeing is that is alcoholism. The idea that I need to stay sober, but I cannot stay sober, that is alcoholism. And that is the manifestation of the illness as it pertains to those who this chapter applies to. I know I can't put up with this behavior, and I can't quit. I can't quit. And so the solution, we see that the cycle is almost the same. So the solution is going to be the same. And how we access the solution is going to be the same. The 12 steps to bring about that spiritual awakening. So I'll stop the screen share. It goes on to say, we seldom had friends at our homes, never knowing how or when the men of the house would appear. And what we're seeing is that isolation. You see, I thought I was the only one isolating in my drinking and my using, but my loved ones were also isolating. I tell this, my mom heard one of my recordings where I was talking about this, and she laughed. So it's okay that I tell this story. She laughed. And there was a period of time when I was, well, I don't talk about this part too much, because this is one of those things where it's like, oh, I'm not like you. But it's like I was homeless and living on the streets. That doesn't make me an alcoholic. That might make me difficult to live with, but does not make me an alcoholic. What makes me an alcoholic is the allergy and the obsession. That's it. That's what makes me an alcoholic. But I was homeless and living on the streets, and it was, in my late teens. And it was at that time when, a lot of parents are like, yes, my child, like Rob's kid, he's so great. He did a victory lap. He's just kicking butt and taking names at life and education. And my child got accepted into like Harvard or McMaster or whatever, university. And my mom, God bless her, she's like, oh, you run into the other parents. It's like, oh, what's Paige doing? Oh, she's volunteering with the homeless. Oh, bless your heart. Oh, oh, God bless. That's not what I was doing. Like I'm some sort of angel as I'm like behind a dumpster, like, woo, my pants are wet. I'm living my life. It's good. It's good. Where's my shoes? Alrighty. Some of y'all know. Yep. So it's like, but that's what we put our loved ones into, where they can't tell the truth and they isolate. They want to protect. They want to lie. It says we could make few social engagements. We came to live almost alone. I'm not the only one that isolates because of my illness. And it says when we were invited out, our husbands sneaked so many drinks that they spoiled the occasion. Do we have anyone here any drink sneakers? Anyone here go to a party and sneak drinks? Anyone here go to a party and you hide the drugs, you hide that you're using? I'm just going to point something out. If I have to sneak it, it is an indication I have the allergy, because why would anyone have a problem with me doing it? Just going to throw that out there, because if you're like, I don't have a problem, it's like, why do you got to sneak it? Just going to throw that out there. I did that with a sponsee one time. It was not well received. Where it's like, oh. So if, so it says, if on the other hand, now can we relate to this? They took so many, or if on the other hand, they took nothing, their self-pity made them killjoys. Have you ever had to white knuckle a Christmas party where you can't drink? I'm having a great time. Can we go home now? Yeah. Does that sound familiar? That's not how most people engage with alcohol. I'm just going to throw that out there. There was never financial security. Positions were always in jeopardy or gone. How is my financial situation? How is the financial situation of my loved ones? Maybe those that depended on me. An armored car could not have brought the pay envelopes home. The checking account melted like the snow in June. Now, it's not there have been times where I live in the world we have had snow in June, which I think is rude. But imagine Ben down in San Jose, the snow in June, it's gone. There's no snow down there, right? That it's not lasting. Spending it as quickly as we can make it. And I'm affecting the financial security of my loved ones with the manifestation of my illness. Is that my experience? Sometimes there were other women. How heartbreaking was this discovery? How cruel to be told they understood our men as we did not. Now, have I ever been unfaithful? Maybe emotionally, maybe not physically, but in a relationship and justified my behavior? Have I ever done that? And this is an illness that will turn me into somebody that I never wanted to be. Now I can be here and I can tell you, no, I never cheated. I don't. I'm just not that person. Except for the mistress that I had that was alcoholism. I was pretty unfaithful with booze. I don't know. I was in a pretty tumultuous relationship with crack cocaine, and I was doing that behind his back. He was also an alcoholic and a crack addict. I'm just going to throw that out there. And I am hiding my drug use from also somebody that is an addict. The flags were red. Listen, he's not the problem. I'm the problem. He's a little, it was red flags all over the place. I'm like, what a carnival, wee, no, red flags. But that's the reality. And the selfishness that I can't see how my behavior affects others. Now it says the bill collectors, the sheriffs, the angry taxi drivers, the policemen, the bums, the pals, even the ladies they sometimes brought home. Do I know what it's like to have people that around that shouldn't be around, bringing home, or police having to do welfare checks, the ambulance having to come get me, and I have had the ambulance come a time or two and be like, again, no, thank you. No, thank you. And I was so out of it. I couldn't sign. You have to sign when they're like, we're concerned about you. We would like you have to AMA, not go with them. And I was like, I'm going to do it. And I did an X, which technically is legally allowed. I didn't know that, but I got away with it. Probably should have gone anyway. But ambulances are out of budget. Anyway, you got it. So it goes on to say, our husbands thought we were so inhospitable. Joy killer, neg, wet blanket. That's what they said. Now, I will let you know, I am kind of known for having a lot of patience. It's kind of a thing, and sometimes people act like it's a compliment. I don't think it is. They're like, Paige, you have the patience of a saint. I'm like, I don't know if that's a good thing. But if the guy is bringing home other women, I'm just going to say, I don't think I'm a neg or inhospitable if I'm like, absolutely effing not. I'm just going to throw out there that is a fair and reasonable boundary. No, no. But that's what it's like. It's like, you don't get me. It's like we turn into a toddler. I can't do what I want, right? It goes on to say, that's what they said. The next day they would be themselves again, and we would forgive and try to forget. Again, going through this cycle. Okay, I'm just going to kind of try to move on. I'm just going to hope that it's going to be different. And it says we've tried to hold the love of our children for their father. And I want to point something out. We're beginning to see a progression, just as we do on page 31. 31 is we're going to try to limit our drinks. And by the end of that paragraph, we're going to asylums. We're trying everything we can to stop. We're seeing this progression. And another way to look at this part of the book is that is the power that this illness has. If you're like me, it's like, I would never want to cheat on somebody. But this is causing me to cross boundaries I would never cross. That's what we're going to see in this paragraph. Boundaries that I would never cross. That is the power of this illness. And that's what I'm up against. An illness that will transform me into somebody that is absolutely unrecognizable to someone like myself. I need a transformational process. I can't just put down the drink or put down the whatever and try to do it on my own. This is the power that this illness has. So it says we have tried to hold the love of our children for their father. We have told small tots that father was sick, which was much nearer the truth than we realized. They struck the children, kicked out door panels, smashed treasured crockery, and ripped the keys out of pianos. And that is, yeah, sorry, that was bad timing for your comedic thing. Because I was like, I'll do the comedy and then I'll get back serious. Scott put in the chat, he's like, I've always wanted to rip the keys out of pianos. I know, but I'm not, listen, I'm not a pianist, but I do like to say that word. Also a flautist. I'm not a pianist, but anyway, listen, those are expensive to get those rekeyed. That's out of budget for this girl. But that sort of behavior is abuse. And I'll tell you, I became abusive in my alcoholism. I was throwing things. I was. There are holes in walls and dents in walls, and there was my blood on walls. Apparently, I have some issues with walls. Like I became somebody that's not who I am. Like that's the power of this illness. And that's also the need with which I have to recover. I don't take it lightly. I joke a lot and I'm like, yeah, it's thank goodness we're not ripping piano keys out anymore. And I'll joke, but like that is the seriousness. That is the need to get freedom from this thing. And it goes on to say, in desperation, we even got tight ourselves, the drunk to end all drunks. And I love this line because when I was full of, I don't have a problem. If he would just get his stuff together, everything would be fine. There was a little ding, a little click that, oh, Rob's got a picture of Lois's piano, keys and all. But there was a little ding with the in desperation we even got tight ourselves. Because I read that and I'm like, oh yeah, that's me. I really have a hard time with his drinking and his, drug use and his behavior. I'm just drinking at him. But if I need to drink to control his alcoholism, it's maybe a sign. And the truth is, once I started, I couldn't stop. And there were times that he was sober and I couldn't stay sober. And that was the dark truth about my experience. I needed to stay sober. I had to stay sober. I wanted to stay sober, if even for my codependent butt to keep his butt sober. And I couldn't do it. It says, perhaps at this point, we got a divorce. Oh, sorry. The unexpected result was that her husband seemed to like it. Yeah, because it's like, I'm not in the doghouse for drinking right now. Like, woo, yeah. It goes on to say, perhaps at this point, we got a divorce and took the children home to father and mother. Then we were severely criticized by our husband's parents for desertion. You can't give up on them. You can't, or if it's a parent, it's like, but that's your mother, that's your father. You can't, right? Like even when we leave, even when we do that, it's not enough. But this is how we know that this chapter is for those who are as bound to the alcoholic as the alcoholic is bound to alcohol. Usually we did not leave. We stayed on and on. We finally sought employment ourselves as destitution faced us and our families. So we're front row seat to misery and we're not able to quit. We're not even able to leave. That is who this chapter is for. And so when we contextualize it, that's why the suggestions aren't just leave, because they're going to get back to them. That's why in the rooms of 12 steps, the suggestion of just don't drink doesn't work, because I can't just not drink. Just don't drink, but I can't. Just play the tape, but we can't. It's not a sufficient substitute. So leaving for an Al-Anon, leaving for an unhealed codependent, and leaving for those who are as bound to the alcoholic as the alcoholic is bound to alcohol. Even if I leave, I'm going to find another one with the exact same, and I'm going to find myself in that cycle again. Man, and this is for those who've written some inventory, You'll get what I'm saying. Anyone here ever find out you're dating your parent again and again and again? It's like, oh no, those issues are just manifesting. And that, I will tell you, it's rude. It is rude when you come to that realization, like, oh no, no. Because that's the thing. If I don't heal it, it's going to continue on. And that's what we're seeing. And that's the context. And there are people who can have a bad run of alcohol and say that, or drugs, and say, I'm done forever. And they're able to. And there are people that are able to get into relationships before their frontal lobe is developed, which I'd say that shouldn't be allowed, but you can't tell me nothing until I got a frontal lobe. And even then, I don't know if it's developed, those, relationships we get in, but he's got a motorcycle and some felonies, but I can't see the problem there. It must be real. He wasn't functional enough to have a motorcycle. But he's got a tent. He was too drunk to put it up. Oh, romance, under a bridge. That's literally where we met, by the way. I was on a pass from a psych ward, and he was under the bridge, and somebody else had wet their pants, and there was a little trail of pee that was inching towards him. And he was woken up by a motorcycle that went by that was too loud. It was true love. Ugh. Ugh. I think you guys could tell at no point was the trajectory of that relationship on an upward slope. It started it from the bottom, and then it went even lower. If you hear, just if we're quiet, we just listen, we can hear me scraping the bottom of the barrel with my life and my choices. That's where I was. But that's the idea, is that this chapter is for those who aren't able to quit. That's who this is for. So it goes on to say, we began to ask medical advice as the sprees got closer together. And that's what we're talking about with the cycle. That I say, I'm never going to do it again. And where we were once able to stay sober for a year or more, we're now not able to make it a week or even 3 days. That's what begins to happen as we progress. So we're seeing the progression of the illness. And if I did not have alcoholism, I would stop before it got that bad. And if I was not bound to the alcoholic, I'd be like, this guy kind of sucks. I should leave. You know what I mean? He's not it, right? And it says the alarming physical and mental symptoms. And this is probably one of the only places where the physical and mental symptoms aren't referring to the two symptoms of alcoholism. But I just want to bounce off on that. The two symptoms of alcoholism, or the two symptoms of whatever illness brings you to this all-inclusive study, is the allergy and the obsession. And in this book, whenever it talks about physical or body, what it is solely talking about exactly is the allergy, which is once I start, I cannot stop. And any time in this book, it's talking about mind or mental or of. Oh, thank you. That's so kind. So glad you're here. Mind, what we're talking about, mental, is the obsession of the mind. And when we see that through that lens, it makes it so clear. So it says the deepening pall of remorse, depression, and inferiority that settled down on our loved ones. These things terrified, because there's nothing more frightening than watching a front row seat to the imminent destruction. And it said, and distracted us. The focus is trying to fix, trying to save, trying to cure, trying to, just relieve them of their illness. It says, as animals on a treadmill. And the thing about, I think of the little hamster wheel, very literally like a cycle. I can't get off. But here's the thing, like the alcoholic, the Al-Anon is trying. We are all trying, and it is not enough. Do I know what that's like? To feel like I'm doing everything that I can do, but it's not working. That's what it's like. We have patiently and wearily climbed, falling back in exhaustion after each futile effort to reach solid ground. And the analogy of alcoholism is a lot like the myth of Sisyphus. I have to pronounce. I have to be careful pronouncing that because people think I'm saying syphilis, and I'm not. I'm saying Sisyphus, and it is a story. It's the story of ancient Greece. There was also a version for the ancient Roman gods where a gentleman was cursed to have to roll a boulder up a hill, and just as he got it to the very top, it would roll back down. And that's what trying to stay sober on my willpower is like. And that's also what it's like trying to keep somebody else sober. If you've done it, you know it is pushing this boulder and it falls back down inevitably, which is to say, the relapse is inevitable. My relapse or their relapse. That's the nature of the illness. That's the step one condition we find ourselves in. So I need a way to get off the cycle. That's a spiritual awakening. It says, and so as animals on a treadmill, we have patiently and wearily climbed, falling back in exhaustion after each futile effort to reach solid ground. It's futile, it's hopeless. It's another way to say hopeless. Like, I cannot do it. Most of us have entered the final stage with its commitment to health resorts. So probably not spas, probably emergency rooms, rehabs, treatment centers, and it says sanitariums. That's going to be psych wards, hospital, emergency rooms, jails. Have I experienced going to institutions? And an institution, if you're wondering, it's a place where they make you make your bed and you can't leave when you want. That's an institution. The sober living, detox, rehab, all of those. They often give you grippy socks, which, as we know, that's a turn on for me. Woo! That's my type. All right. It says sometimes there was screaming delirium and insanity. Death was often near. And that, what they're doing in those few pages, is what it was doing for us on page 31. Is that my experience? And next week, we're going to see some of the directions that they're going to give. And then we're inevitably, we'll get there when we get there, but we're going to see 4 types of drinkers and how do we help each and every one. So I'll stop the recording and we can wrap it up with the Serenity Prayer. Oh yeah, get your calendars. It's this, and if you're like, I don't want a calendar, you get your sponsor a calendar. You don't got a sponsor, get a sponsor. Get your sponsees calendars. Go get the calendars. Sorry, I should have done all that after I stopped the recording. Just like to support Bob. Alrighty.